Hi there, and welcome to my virtual poster presentation. My name is Kelly Taylor, and I am a second-year teacher candidate studying primary junior education at Brock University. Today I'm going to walk you through my action research plan that I have designed in order to improve and further develop my teaching practices. Part 1 is where I will be outlining my research problem to you and introducing you to the focus of my research action plan. In recent years, I have noticed that there has been a steady increase in the interest and discussion surrounding differentiated instruction. That being said, there are so many ways to interpret and implement differentiated instruction into the classroom. As I reflect back on my experiences as a student, I feel as though there has been an underlying idea that differentiated instruction must be directed specifically at students with formal diagnoses or exceptionalities in the classroom. This is something I strongly disagree with and has been the inspiration and motivation for my research plan I am telling you about today. We are fortunate enough to live where education is a right for all students, but what happens to the students who need extra support and assistance in the classroom? Although the Education Act states that schools must provide exceptional students with appropriate special education programs, it is crucial that educators extend this way of thinking to include all students who have individual needs. That being said, I have struggled personally to differentiate and support 20+ students with different needs and learning styles, all at the same time. This has inspired my research problem and has pushed me to focus on how we, as educators, can ensure that we are fulfilling our duties to support every student we teach. After examining the research problem, I have narrowed down my focus and developed 2 research questions that will fuel the remainder of my action plan. The first question looks at differentiation in a larger sense. How can I ensure that I am supporting my students with exceptionalities that are identified on a formal IEP while not failing to neglect those who have less apparent needs but still require assistance and differentiation? The second question begins to get more specific and looks at strategies and resources that could be used. What tools and resources can I use to provide appropriate differentiated instruction and help meet the needs of all students in my classroom? Before we dive deeper into the action plan and specifics of the problem, it is important to look at what goes into differentiated instruction and truly understand what the terms involved mean. I selected 5 important terms that are relevant to this study and can be defined as the following. Differentiated instruction is effective instruction that is responsive to students' readiness, interests, and learning preferences. I just want to make a note here and point out that this definition states nothing specifically about students with exceptionalities or diagnoses. It is simply aimed at providing students with all interests and preferences the supports they need in the classroom. Accommodations are supports or services that are not provided to the general student population, but are required by individual students with special needs to help them achieve learning expectations and demonstrate learning. Modifications, on the other hand, are changes made in the appropriate grade level expectations for a subject or course in order to meet a student's learning needs. Special education in general is an education program that is based on and modified by the results of continuous assessment and evaluation and contains a plan specific to the needs of an exceptional student. Lastly, the Individualized Education Plan, or IEP as we often refer to it, is a written plan describing the program and/or services required by a particular student that is based on the assessment of their individual strengths and needs. Why these definitions specifically, you might ask? When implementing strategies and tools in the classroom in order to meet the needs of your students, it is important to understand these terms. What is the difference between an accommodation and a modification? Are you making these changes because you have to, according to an IEP, or are you simply trying to support your students as best you can? Can you implement differentiated instruction without having to label it as special education? It is crucial to understand these terms in order to appropriately apply differentiated instruction in the classroom, especially when you are doing so with the hopes of supporting all learners. Before moving on to the next portion of the plan, there are some questions that I would like to address that will set us up for the remainder of this presentation. How can we ensure that differentiated instruction is being implemented consistently and appropriately? How can we ensure that educators have the knowledge, confidence, and ability to implement these strategies effectively? Is differentiated instruction an effective tool in all subject areas and across all grade levels? In what ways can we implement differentiated instruction strategies to support our students? We are now going to move into the actual creation and organization of the action research plan. We will be looking at data collection and analysis, research considerations, and possible implications. The first step in completing a research study is deciding what data to collect and from where. For the sake of this study, I've selected 3 different data sources that will cover a range of perspectives in order to give a more complete sense of the effectiveness and importance of differentiated instruction. The 3 sources are as follows. School records, such as tests, report cards, and classroom assessment scores. The first step I would take in getting to know my students in order to plan how to effectively implement differentiated instruction is by reviewing school records. I need to understand the needs of my students before I can implement effective strategies. Having a basic understanding of their academic strengths and weaknesses is an ideal place to start. Next, I would take anecdotal records and observations, possibly in the form of checklists. During the first few weeks of school, as I'm getting to know my students better, it is important that I keep anecdotal records and observations of behaviors demonstrated in class. These records will help me see beyond just the academics and develop strategies that are designed to meet the individual needs of my entire class. The last data source are interviews and self-reflection. No one knows the students better than them themselves, and by providing them with the opportunity to reflect on their learning and share their own insight into what they need to be successful, I will be able to better support them and empower them in their learning. With collecting data comes the need to ensure triangulation, validity, and reliability in your research. In terms of triangulation, I ensured that the academic articles examined the effects of differentiated instruction across different ages to ensure consistency. The sources included both qualitative and quantitative data and addressed a variety of topics such as the frequency of DI, the effectiveness of it, and a subject-specific study. The study also includes participants that are both teachers and students. To ensure validity, school records were used as they offer a high degree of truthfulness and little room for bias. Although it may not be the best representation of the student's learning in terms of the product, the results will provide you with a valid understanding of their basic academic ability. Consulting with previous teachers also gives a second opinion that adds a layer of validity. Finally, in order to ensure reliability, anecdotal records and observations, as well as student reflections, will be conducted on a regular basis throughout the school year, offering multiple points of data collection from which to compare results. The comparison between teacher records and student reflections will also provide another layer of reliability from which the teacher can ensure that findings and observations are consistent over time. The next step to consider is the participants and setting of the research study. For this specific plan, the participants will include 24 students from a grade 5 class, the classroom teacher, and colleagues in the school that have worked with the same students previously. The data will be collected in the classroom during the classes focused on math and language arts. With every research study comes the potential for ethical issues and implications. In order to ensure that these ethical concerns do not arise, the following will be done. As the teacher, I would be the main individual analyzing the collected data and implementing strategies within the classroom to ensure that confidentiality is maintained. All previous student records will be reviewed on school premises, and according to school policy, OSR documents will not be removed from the cabinets in the office. Students and parents will complete a consent form to ensure they are fully aware of the research being conducted, understand why and how the data is being collected and used, who will be involved, and how their privacy will be protected. It is important to note that they will be made aware of their right to drop out without penalty at any point. If other personnel are required for consultations, I will ensure that they are employed by the school and no outside personnel will be consulted without informed parental consent. All strategies used in the classroom will be implemented following a one-on-one student-teacher conference to ensure they are aware of the strategy but do not feel singled out, unless, however, the strategy is one that is being implemented for the benefit of all students, for example, flexible seating. The data collection process will be broken down according to the following timeline. The school records will be collected daily during the first 2 weeks of the school year in early September of the 2019-2020 year. Anecdotal notes and observations will be recorded weekly across all subjects from September 2019 to April 2020. Notes will be reviewed each Friday. Please note that the subjects specified are math and language arts. Student reflections and journals will be conducted bi-weekly from October 2019 to April 2020. Reflections will be compared with teacher notes every other Friday, and a student goal sheet will be completed within the first few weeks of school. Once the data has been collected, the next step is to analyze and determine the results of the study. Data collected will be tracked and analyzed as follows. Student records. The teacher will record student report card grades from the previous 2 years and input results on an Excel spreadsheet, creating a triple line graph to display trends in student scores. Anecdotal records and observations. The teacher will record data on the following 3 elements: academic strengths and weaknesses, learning skills and work habits, and behavioral observations. Students will be given a score on a 4-point scale in each category, and results will be tracked alongside the student records. A second line graph will be created. Self-reflections and journals. Students' perceptions of themselves will be compared with teacher notes and will focus on the following: subject strengths and weaknesses, other classroom supports, such as seating, noise, etc. Students will have the opportunity to score themselves according to the 4-point scale. The final step in the action research plan is to look at the academic articles reviewed in the beginning stages and understand their role in the creation of the entire plan. The first article that was reviewed was a study conducted by 2 scientists who were looking at the effectiveness and importance of implementing differentiated instruction in the classroom. They recruited 200 students, 30 teachers, and 30 parents from both public and non-public schools to participate. Through questionnaires and interviews, they found that teachers are not adequately implementing DI in the classroom and are focused more on the final product than the process. Despite the potential for bias in the use of self-reported measures such as questionnaires, the study highlights important aspects of teaching that must be examined. As discussed in the research question, it is important that we evaluate not only how to implement differentiated instruction, but also why it is a beneficial tool. The next article was a study conducted in 2018 that looked at the short and long-term effects of differentiated instruction on reading fluency and comprehension in a group of 619 grade 3 students. The study took place over a 2-year period and saw one group given DI while another group was not. The research found that differentiated instruction is a beneficial tool in regards to improving student reading fluency, especially for students with lower reading skills. There were no definitive results, however, to show how differentiated instruction impacts reading comprehension. The final article was conducted in 2017 and studied student motivation levels when differentiated instruction was implemented. The students included 27 elementary school teachers and 422 students, and used self-report measures to look at the frequency and effectiveness of differentiated instruction. Research findings concluded that student motivation was positively impacted when teachers implemented differentiated instruction frequently, and motivation was negatively implemented when it was infrequent. As you would have heard from the description of the articles reviewed, I broke down my research into 3 domains: a specific subject area, the frequency that differentiated instruction is being implemented, and its overall effectiveness in the classroom. It is evident that differentiated instruction is not being utilized to its full extent and is therefore not providing students with the supports they need to be successful and motivated learners. That being said, the literature also supports the claims that differentiated instruction is in fact an extremely beneficial tool that can increase academic success and has the ability to positively impact student learning in terms of motivation and willingness to learn. It is also important to note that none of these articles focus on implementing differentiated instruction specifically to students with exceptionalities. Guy, Roy, and Valois found that differentiated instruction strategies allow students to accomplish tasks that match their abilities, which helps them achieve goals and feel competent. Accommodating for a variety of learning styles and abilities is something that any teacher can do in their classroom, and similar to the previous study, the other study in 2018 found that students were more actively involved and engaged when given different ways to learn based on their individual needs. There has been a lot of evidence and support as to why differentiated instruction is important, but much of the focus has been on the lack of implementation that has been happening in classrooms thus far. Forrester, Kowal, and Sauvigny have shown the effects that differentiated instruction can have when properly and consistently used within elementary school students. They also found that differentiating reading instruction could be implemented in whole classrooms with general education and showed positive growth in reading fluency. When teachers were encouraged to use this approach, it also caused a shift in their teaching behavior. Despite the clear connections to the research question, there are gaps and limitations that must be addressed. Each of the studies relied on some form of self-report measure of data collection that offers the potential for inaccurate or biased information which could impact the overall results and validity of the study. These articles all collectively provide supportive evidence for the importance of implementing differentiated instruction in the general education classroom in order to assist students with their learning. The questions that remain are how to ensure educators are being properly informed and trained on how to implement these strategies, and how to ensure that all students are being supported based on their individual needs and abilities. Differentiated instruction is an effective tool in the classroom to support all learners and provide optimal support for student motivation and success as demonstrated through the academic research reviewed. However, through further designing this action research study, I have gained not only knowledge on the importance of implementing differentiated instruction, but the consequences that may arise when you fail to do so, and various strategies that can be used in the classroom. Equity versus equality is something I greatly value, and by taking these steps to accommodate for my students' individual needs, I feel as though I am doing my due diligence to provide them with the most safe, supportive, and successful classroom environment possible.